Liberty in our lifetimes in a free state of our own. That's the vision. That's the dream. We are building it in New Hampshire. I'm Eric Brakey, your host and renegade statesman for the Porcupine Report. Welcome to your source for porcupine news and free-range conversation on matters of liberty. All right, let's hop into the show. Hello and welcome everyone to episode 18 of the Porcupine Report. I am, as always, your host, your renegade statesman, your executive director of the Free State Project, Eric Brakey. Thank you so much for joining us today. Glad to have you here. We're going to have a great show today. I just got back just the other day from a weekend at the National Libertarian Convention. The Free State Project was a sponsor of the convention. It was a great opportunity to go and network with so many great liberty lovers from across America, and to also sell them why, if they really care about the cause of liberty, they should move to New Hampshire and join the Free State Project, or at very least come up for PorcFest and check it out for a week and then maybe stay for a lifetime. Great conversations. And I will tell you, the convention itself was, boy, there were so many plots and subplots going on at the Libertarian National Convention. I don't know that Shakespeare himself could have written a play as intricate as this, with as many plots and subplots going on. And we'll be talking with our guest today about that. But before we get to our guest, I want to, as always, tell you why, if you have not already made your plans and got your tickets for the Porcupine Freedom Festival, you do not want to miss out. The Porcupine Freedom Festival, hosted by the Free State Project, is taking place this June 17th through the 23rd at Rogers Campground in Lancaster, New Hampshire. This is a family-friendly freedom festival with Ron Paul himself will be joining us virtually to speak to all festival goers. And though while he's joining us virtually over Zoom, other people will be physically Zooming to the convention by plane, by train, by automobile, however you get there. Maybe they'll be paragliding in. Anyway, they're joining us physically. 2,000 of your favorite libertarians, including Spike Cohen, Jack Hunter, Gene Epstein, Jeffrey Tucker, James Bovard, David Friedman, and so many more. I hope that you will join us. This is not to be missed. Bring your friends, bring your family, and reserve your campsite while supplies last. There are still some RV sites available, last I checked. And if you don't have an RV, you can do tenting at an RV site. You just also have an electrical outlet you can plug your stuff into. So please make sure to take advantage of that, or reach out to others, and people are sharing campsites. But grab your tickets at porcfest.com before they sell out. We're looking forward to it. It's just around the corner. May's almost done. June will be here, and PorcFest will be upon us. All right, to the rest of the show. So as I mentioned, we're getting back. I just got back from the Libertarian National Convention. Our guest today was a delegate to the Libertarian Convention from the state of New Hampshire. He's an active member of the Free State Movement. He goes by the title of Tall Bill. And while you cannot see this on video, I will just say, because he's sitting down and I'm sitting down, he's called Tall Bill for a reason. And if you were to put us side by side with each other, it's very clear. It's very clear why he's called Tall Bill. Hey, Bill, welcome to the Porcupine Report.
Good morning, Eric. Thank you for having me.
Hey, I'm trying to remember. I know at Liberty Forum, we put you and Glenn Jacobs side by side to see who was taller. I can't remember who came out on top in that. It was you, officially taller than Glenn Jacobs. All right.
Yeah. He said he used to be as tall as me before he got thrown on his head as many times as he got thrown.
Well, I will say as well, in 2019, I came to PorcFest, and I participated in one of the great PorcFest traditions, Soapbox Idol. I'm sorry, that wasn't 2019. That was 2021. And I took second place. I gave an inspiring talk about why libertarians should not be so pessimistic and should be more optimistic. But I came in second place to Tall Bill, who beat me out at at Soapbox Idol. So he is the champion. Congratulations. Though I do still feel I was cheated. There were Dominion voting machines everywhere.
I've lost every year since then, and I think the only reason why I kind of rigged the crowd, I cheated that year. So
all right.
Just know that I knew all the people in the audience personally.
All right. So it wasn't Dominion voting machines, but I do have an admission that the election was rigged. So all right, now I feel better about myself.
And my topic that year for my rant was about just getting people upset and how that can be a good thing. And
And you've been doing that ever
from
since.
the Libertarian Party, and you watch this interview with me, you may get upset by this too. So brace yourselves.
All right. Well, we certainly don't aim to libertarians. We don't just like to tell people what they want to hear. We want to challenge them and maybe make them kind of think outside the box a little bit. So, well, first of all, I know this was my first Libertarian National Convention. Was this your first? Have you been in past years?
I've only been to the state conventions before. I did go to this one, not knowing what to expect. The first thing I do want to say about the convention itself is I don't care about national politics at all. I don't care about the Libertarian National Party. I think that mostly it's a bunch of losers and failures who are pretending that they're going to get something done, and they just go and waste a whole bunch of time and money and energy and resources doing that. So my goal when I went to this was just to strictly promote New Hampshire.
Well, and certainly I think from the New Hampshire delegation, that seemed to be the main focus. I think that in every single photo of the convention floor that came out there, or Donald Trump speaking, there is someone holding a sign that I think that our producer Ray Nita did most of the creation of move to New Hampshire. So I think that message got out, whether others liked it or not, that if you want to advance liberty, stop LARPing and come to New Hampshire.
Yeah, we were photobombing journalists. We were getting up on stage with candidates that we didn't support. We were doing everything that was probably a little bit irreverent and maybe slightly socially abnormal, just to get our message out there. We went and stood on chairs at the Trump event, and we're blasting Move to New Hampshire signs as well as some other signs, and kind of just trying to get the pot stirred up. Also trying to make the point. It's like people who go to these things, they get frustrated every few years. You know, the Libertarian Party has this turnover of like, what is its vision? What does it want to be? And it's just such a short-term goal, and then people fight over it, and then the party inevitably changes hands. And the Free State Project is here to stay.
Absolutely, going generation strong, over 20 years, and now into the second generation, and going forward stronger than ever. But let's. I know that the presidential politics is a bit of a sideshow, but it is an entertaining sideshow. Certainly. I don't believe that we're ever going to achieve liberty from inside, Washington, D.C. I think it's going to come from states revolting and nullifying and shaking off kind of the power structure of Washington, D.C. as New Hampshire is leading the way with. But it was well, let's set the stage, right? So for those who don't know, those who don't follow libertarian politics, and by libertarian I mean big L libertarian politics, right? The politics of the Libertarian Party. For the last several years, there's been some conflict, and there's been some differing visions on what the Libertarian Party should be. My good friend Dave Smith is a part of the Mises Caucus, and in fact, 3 years ago now, I had a debate with him about whether the liberty movement, the Ron Paul liberty movement, which I identify with, should focus more on a Republican strategy or a Libertarian Party strategy. Dave argued for the Libertarian Party strategy. They wanted the Ron Paul, they called themselves the Ron Paul wing of the liberty movement, to take over the Libertarian Party and to make it, they would call it an actual Libertarian Party, and not kind of going in for a lot of the woke stuff, and certainly a lot of what we saw during the pandemic, where the National Libertarian Party failed to really challenge one of the policies during one of the worst eras of tyranny in our lifetime, with mandates and lockdowns and vaccine mandates and all these things. And the Libertarian Party was mostly silent. The Mises Caucus came in after that, kind of took over the party, I think at 2 years ago at their convention in Reno, with the idea that they would get a Mises Caucus candidate to be their presidential nominee. Now, at this convention, the Mises Caucus folks managed to retain control of the party, with Angela McArdle being reelected as the chair of the Libertarian Party, but the Mises Caucus candidate, Dr. Michael Rechtenwald, came in second place and lost. I guess he'd come in first place every single round of voting, but lost in the end to Chase Oliver, who's more of a, some would say, kind of an old guard Libertarian Party individual, certainly not a fan of the Mises Caucus, or hasn't been in the past. And I think many have criticized him for maybe being leftist on certain things. I know that social media images have emerged of him, during lockdowns with the mask on and telling people to social distance and to, and bragging about not being, only having 10 people over for a holiday or something. And so I think some people have criticized him for that and wonder, what the presidential race is going to look like with him as the candidate. Of course, you also had, I think this was the major news, with the Mises Caucus leading the party, they invited all the three other major presidential candidates, Donald Trump, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., and Joe Biden, to come and speak at the Libertarian Party convention. Two of them accepted. Joe Biden didn't show up, but was happy to criticize others who were there. Well, I guess let's jump. I'd be very curious. Were you there for both the speeches of Robert F. Kennedy Jr. and Donald Trump?
I didn't go to Robert Kennedy Jr.'s speech. He's not going to be president. I can't stand listening to his voice, and I don't think he's a libertarian at all. So I wasn't super. I've seen him speak before. It's nice. He's going to do a little pandering, and then he's going to talk about some stuff I don't care about, and it's going to be hard to listen to.
Well, I will say I do think it's interesting. So I did hear him talk, and I thought it was interesting, contrast his speech with Trump's, in that I thought he did try a little bit more to appeal to libertarian values and pander to libertarian values, where Trump's speech seemed a lot more transactional. It's like, hey, I want your votes. You want these policy things here. We'll do this. We'll do that. Do some of these libertarian demands, and let's make a deal. I will say it is interesting. I think with Chase Oliver as the libertarian nominee, it does position Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to be the only candidate in the race who's the candidate who's the referendum candidate on the COVID era. But there will be no referendum on the COVID era because even RFK is not going to be able to do anything. He'll get maybe 10% of the vote at most, which seems unlikely to me. Yeah. It's kind of sad, right? There's a whole massive contingent of people on the right who hated the COVID stuff, and they're all diehard MAGA people. Almost all of them. They're just clueless. This is the guy who gave Dr. Fauci the Congressional Medal of Honor or whatever on his last day of office. I'm leaving office, not going to pardon Julian Assange or anything like that. But what I will do is give the biggest, most corrupt, dirty liar who ruined everybody's lives an award. It's crazy. There will be no referendum. Chase Oliver bought the propaganda for over a year. There's posts from March of 2021 where he's bragging about his N95 masks, and it's just, if you were buying the official narrative on COVID for over a year, you're just not a smart enough libertarian for me to think that you can represent me, right? It was apparent to many people in March of 2020 or April of 2020 that the story that was being put out, whether it was by Dr. Fauci or by the media or even by Donald Trump, was not correct. The case fatality rate versus the infection fatality rate, those deliberate conflations of those statistics, the way that they were testing people only in ICUs, right? If you are going to get data on the way that a disease affects people and you only reach out to the most vulnerable populations, you only test people in the ICU, you're obviously going to get the worst results. So anybody who looks at this sampling of data, and I'm not a statistician. I don't know. I've never taken a statistics class in my life. I just know that an old statistical expression is shit in, shit out. So if you go and you get a bunch of bad data and you crunch the numbers and you reach all these conclusions about it, well, if it was bad data that you processed to get your conclusions about how many people are dying from the disease or how many people are getting the disease, it's going to be a bad set of data that comes out of that. So when you only test, COVID, it's a novel disease. We don't have tests. We're going to test only the most vulnerable populations.
Well, who's going to get hurt the most by the disease? Vulnerable population. So then what you do is you say, look, out of 100 people that we tested, 3 of them died. That's a 3% fatality rate, right? But you didn't test anybody who wasn't actually already on their deathbed. People in the ICU are largely on their deathbed. It's like intensive care means you're not going to make it unless we have you hooked up to 1 million machines, breathing tubes, IVs, etc. Many people are in comas while they're in the ICU. This is not a population that we should all be judging our ability to survive COVID based off of. So yeah, no, Chase Oliver did not see any of that. As far as that goes, many libertarians across the country are going to want nothing to do with this guy. He's clearly of the left to the extent that, during COVID times, just like Joe Jorgensen, this guy was, parroting leftist slogans like Black Lives Matter, not because there's dispute from libertarians about whether Black lives actually matter, just to appease the left. So one thing that will happen with this Chase Oliver nomination, if the Libertarian Party did want to take votes from Donald Trump, they just shot themselves in the foot. They're not taking any votes from Donald Trump with the Chase Oliver nomination. They'll take maybe some from Biden, but that, if anything, gives Donald Trump a better chance of winning.
Well, it is interesting that it is hard for me to walk away from this convention without the impression that Donald Trump was the big winner, right? All the headlines were, I guess let's get to Donald Trump's speech, right? So he was booed, he was heckled, though there were a few moments where people cheered for him, particularly when he talked about, he talked about being the first president to not start any new wars. I think he was cheered on that. He promised to free Ross Ulbricht. He was cheered on that. I believe he was called loudly. People called him a hypocrite when he blamed inflation on Joe Biden, because we all know that Joe Biden is half responsible for the inflation that we face today. But Donald Trump during his last year was bragging about the biggest spending package ever, right? And printing trillions of dollars into thin air, whether it's under a Democrat president or a Republican president, leads to inflation. And so they're both responsible for that. But certainly it seems that I see it, certainly a lot of Mises Caucus folks who are walking away. They weren't thinking about, they didn't think they were going to be supporting Donald Trump. But now I see people saying, well, if the candidate is Chase Oliver, they don't feel like he really reflects their values. And Donald Trump, he is no libertarian, but he certainly has given an offer to libertarians that included pardoning Ross Ulbricht. For those who don't know, he was the young man who was a libertarian who created the Silk Road website where people use cryptocurrency to transact and certain things that don't violate the non-aggression principle, but do violate the arbitrary laws of the federal government. And he's got a double life sentence plus 40 years for building a website. I know the day after I called his mom and spoke, well, we had a few voicemail exchanges back and forth, but she seemed very happy to hear that Donald Trump had made this promise. And I know he also said that he would put a libertarian in a cabinet position, though, as I remarked on social media, what does that mean? I'm trying to imagine the most ironic place a libertarian could end up. And I think it's transportation, right? Libertarians finally make it to the White House, but they're only in charge of the roads, right? That would be like a libertarian purgatory. But he also said he would put libertarians throughout his administration, though some question, does he even know what a libertarian is? I mean, after all, people like John Bolton have tried at times to call themselves libertarians, except on foreign policy, right?
So the problem is the Libertarian Party doesn't even know what a libertarian is. So of course Donald Trump doesn't know what a Libertarian Party is. The Libertarian Party is going through like a 2 to 4 year cycle of battle for its own identity. So is a libertarian like Bob Barr, or is it Joe Jorgensen, or is it Dave Smith, or is it Gary Johnson? Certainly not Bob Barr, in my opinion. Chase Oliver seems like a Democrat who's good on war and economics. I don't know that Trump is going to be able to tell, because the libertarians can't tell. If you look within the Libertarian Party, most of these people, because and it's sad, I think it's a result of them always losing. The people on the left of the Libertarian Party look at like the Mises Caucus and like, those aren't real libertarians. They're MAGA, fascist, racist Trump bigots. you know, and the people on the right side, like the Mises Caucus folks, will look at the left libertarians like Chase Oliver and say, this is a gay communist from the left, you know, and we want nothing to do with it. He doesn't represent our party. And so, of course, Donald Trump isn't going to know, because even the libertarians don't know. The only libertarians who have a solid sense of identity are the libertarians in New Hampshire.
Yeah, I mean, I will say too, you know, some of the remarks that I heard that stuck out to me, I think the best, you know, and I think it was a shame the whole convention didn't get to hear this, but Dave Smith gave a speech over one of the ticketed lunches that was there. So you needed to have a ticket to get in. It was like an extra cost, so not everyone could hear it. But he gave some, I thought, and I hope the video comes out at some point, advice to the Libertarian Party, right? And Dave, of course, Dave Smith was going to be at one point. The plan was for him to be the Mises Caucus candidate for president if he had
Dave
been.
Smith did the 6-year tour saying he's going to run for president, and then pulled the rug out from under the Mises Caucus like last fall.
Yeah, and I do think, you know, he has been, at least on social media, he has maybe excessively so, but he has taken full responsibility for the Mises Caucus failure to win the nomination, and says it's his fault for pulling out for family reasons, and he understands that it did take a lot of the air out of the balloon.
You know, he could have. There's so many ways that could have been handled better. Whether it was Dave Smith or just earlier, you know, because like after the whole tour, going on Rogan and stuff, saying, "Oh yeah, you know, imagine if there was like a candidate like me who could run for president." Kind of like promised everybody's going to do it. Didn't technically promise it, but really gave everybody a very strong impression. He could have like expressed his uneasiness or uncertainty sooner rather than like last fall, last minute. Yeah. And that's, you know, he definitely does. I do respect him for finally coming out and saying, yes, some of this is my fault. However, it's not entirely his fault. The internals of the party there, like the Mises Caucus, who did retain control of the national committee, they didn't do a good job at all playing politics, trying to get people to accept their candidate. If you looked at the rounds of voting that went through for the presidential nominee, Michael Rechtenwald had the most. He had the you said this earlier. He had the most votes in the beginning, but with each round that another candidate dropped off, he picked up like the least votes because they had the largest consolidated block, but nobody wanted to join them. The whole lead up to this, they were saying, if you don't like our candidate, get lost, go pound sand. We don't want to deal with you. It's like, that's not how you play politics. You know, you have hundreds of delegates there. If you want them to consolidate behind your mission, you need to like appease them on some level, right? So it was very telling when you saw every round of voting, you know, another candidate was eliminated and the margin got smaller and smaller. The gap between, you know, Rechtenwald and Chase Oliver got smaller and smaller. And at the end, it was almost a 3-way tie. Not quite, but it was pretty close. It was like 37 to 30 to 27 or something. And you know what? 2/3 of the party didn't want the guy that had been pushed so hard by the Mises Caucus because they weren't willing to consider any alternatives. You know, and the reality is when you promise Dave Smith and you deliver Mike Rechtenwald, yeah, a lot of people aren't going to be impressed.
Yeah,
to be clear, I like Mike Rechtenwald a lot. I just don't think he's the same candidate as Dave Smith.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I will say, I think that Michael Rechtenwald has pledged to move to New Hampshire at some point. So I want to give him credit there.
We're glad to have him.
He's a serious libertarian, right?
That makes him better than Dave Smith. But 10x Dave Smith.
Yeah, certainly. Dave Smith is a very strong communicator of the message, whatever mistakes he may have made along the way. And certainly I understand family issues. I mean, frankly, I guess I'm a little sympathetic to Dave because I know that there are folks who are upset with me leaving the Maine Senate, you know, after 10 years in Maine politics. And part of my reason is, yes, you know, going and wanting to be a part of the free state movement that's happening in New Hampshire, which is very impressive. But also part of me is like, man, you know, at a certain point, like I need to figure out how do I carve out some space and time for family. So I'm a little sympathetic to his reasons, but oh, what was I going to say? I will say, you know, I was sitting there during the LP candidate debate. There were 6 of them on stage with a moderator. And I will say, something I was disappointed in was just listening to them. And it felt like they were all it felt like a libertarian virtue signal competition, right? Like they all had the same libertarian talking points, buzzwords, slogans that you see on social media. And it was like, Who's going to abolish the most 3-letter agencies? Who's going to these are all things we all agree with that would be edgy, right? If we were in a Republican circle, or certainly way off the reservation if you were in a crowd of Democrats. But among libertarians, it felt like everyone was just kind of saying the same things, and nobody was adding anything really novel or interesting to the conversation, except for when you guys nominated Toad for president and said that people needed to move to New Hampshire.
Yeah, isn't it interesting? Like when you watch those debates, there's 6 guys up on stage talking about how when I'm president, I'll do this, and every single one of them knows they're not going to be president. Like They have no chance. They're pretending. They're lying. They're either delusional or they're pretending, and I don't know which one is more embarrassing. To me, to go up there and spend hundreds of hours of your time, if not thousands of hours of time, I'm sure thousands of dollars campaigning, how much energy, get all these people on board. And it's like, part of me is like, I think these people really think next year they're going to wake up America. And part of me is like, everybody knows they're not going to wake up America. This is just like their best chance to give a speech about how libertarian they are. It's exactly like you say, it's just libertarian virtue signaling. And you're not even like saying anything interesting in that group. So it's just everybody, I don't know. I don't want to call it a circle jerk, but it kind of feels that way sometimes.
Yeah. Well, and I think to contrast that, and I think that why candidates like individuals like Dave Smith are compelling, and Spike Cohen too, who also, I was there, had been the vice presidential candidate in the past. I know probably there were a lot of people. He certainly wasn't as talked about as much as Dave Smith, but I'm certainly someone who a lot of people would have been glad to rally around as a candidate. I mean, these are individuals who have a lot of original thoughts and novel ideas and novel approaches that they've injected into kind of the libertarian conversation nationally. And it's certainly, and I will say, to be fair to the candidates, I mean, the debate formats like these, like the traditional presidential debate format, so you got 30 seconds, go. Like I've done that many times, and it is not necessarily the best format for having, a thoughtful conversation on things and to bring novel ideas in.
What do you think about this, Eric? So,
what's that?
You bring up Dave Smith and Spike Cohen, and these people are stars. Like those are special characters. They're better than the average person. They're better than the average libertarian at communicating the ideas. They're stars. Not everybody can be that way. Not a single candidate on that stage for president or vice president was articulate or moving in their ability to speak and convey message as Dave Smith or Spike Cohen. But I think that a lot of libertarians believe that they could just, if I just get up on stage like that, I'll be as inspiring as Dave Smith or as motivational as Spike Cohen, or I'll make a difference like that. And that's not true. That's unfortunately not true. But where you could be a star is if you came to New Hampshire. You can't go up and represent the whole country as a libertarian. It's just impossible. But you could, if you wanted to be a state rep in New Hampshire, represent 3,000 people. And you could actually, like the people of New Hampshire, they really believe in the live free or die ethos in a very big way, So if you wanted to actually like represent libertarians and be a star, there's no place to do it like New Hampshire. Dave Smith and Spike Cohen, they're already stars. They don't need to come to New Hampshire. I would love for them to move to New Hampshire. But the reality is they can have a large impact from wherever they are. And, they're not going to move to New Hampshire or explicitly support the Free State Project because it actually wouldn't make them that much more potent in their attempts to spread the message, right? But somebody like a Chase Oliver or a Mike Termott or even a Michael Rechtenwald, when you come to New Hampshire, you can have absolutely, 10 times the impact as you could on a national level. And that's not to say that like these are like inferior people, but not everybody is as good of a messenger for liberty. And so if you're not a Dave Smith or a Spike Cohen, and you're a Chase Oliver or a Mike Termott, and you come to New Hampshire, you can join the Republican Party, you can join the Democrat Party, you can make one of the two major parties better, you can actually get elected, and you can be a freaking star.
Yeah, you could go on the floor of the House of Representatives and do virtue signaling, liberty talking points there, and it actually will be edgy, right?
Yes, 100%.
You could go up there and say taxation is theft, and people will look around and say, "Can he say that?" Right? Whereas at a libertarian convention, every candidate's taxation is theft. And it's like, yeah, okay, we've heard that a million times. We all know taxation is theft. We already agree. But no, I think that you're right. But of course, I think, another interesting component of this is, right, in New Hampshire, and also, I mean, to a lesser extent in states across the country, libertarians have had a lot of success getting elected to state office, but they don't do it as registered libertarians, right?
Correct.
They've been doing it primarily as running in Republican primaries, winning there, going on to be the Republican nominees, and then winning in the general election. And certainly in New Hampshire, you've got like 100 Liberty Republican legislators in the House of Representatives, a quarter of the body, a bigger concentration than anywhere else in the country. But even in states like Maine, where I come from, you have growing ranks of Liberty legislators running as and winning as Republicans. I do think I remember one registered libertarian winning a state legislative seat a few years back in Wyoming. He won because there was no Republican in the race, so he was able to capture all the.
And it's Wyoming, so there's no Democrats either.
Right, exactly.
No Democrat voters.
Right. So he took out a Democrat incumbent by being a libertarian without a Republican opposing the incumbent. So those are unique circumstances. But one thing I found, and I will say I have appreciated about the Mises Caucus influence within the Libertarian Party the last few years is certainly I felt like as a Liberty Republican, there was more of a sense that, hey, we are in fact all on the same team, and the Liberty movement is bigger than one political party, and this is not supposed to be the Libertarian Party as perhaps as odd as it sounds, should not be partisan, right? The Libertarian Party should be a tool of the Liberty movement, not another checkbox on the Libertarian purity list. Like, if you fight for and believe in liberty principles and you will fight for liberty causes, then you don't need to be a registered libertarian to be a real libertarian. Nobody's going to tell me that Ron Paul was not a real libertarian. Nobody's going to tell me that Thomas Massey is not a real libertarian. And I think the Mises Caucus appreciates that. But boy, I mean, when I was there, I still ran into a couple of people who, when they found out I was a registered Republican, who had worked kind of on liberty issues in the legislature, it's almost like they would have that I was a traitor because I didn't run as a libertarian and lose, right?
They're obsessed with losing. Many of these people are obsessed with losing. The most important thing is the letter next to your name, which is another virtue signal. And they don't care about anybody who actually makes a difference. What they care about is, like, did you look just like me when you said you're a libertarian? Or did you behave just like me when you said you're a libertarian? And, like, unfortunately, not all libertarians are the same. We don't have all the same exact beliefs. And thinking that the only possible strategy to make people, like, to live a freer life is to run as a libertarian is just simply delusional. It's a 50-year track record of failure on all fronts. It's when they have one mayor elected, and, like, good for this guy. There's a Libertarian Party guy who's the elected mayor of Keensburg, Colorado, and good for him. But, like, this guy got this huge thunderous applause. Like, there's a Republican mayor in every other town. It's like, I'm just saying, it's like you could have the same beliefs and get elected as a Republican. You'd maybe get more done. I don't know. It's like, it's such an accomplishment that anybody even got elected with that letter next to the name. Like, that's the win. That guy might be a terrible mayor. He's probably not, but he might be a terrible mayor. It's like the win is that he has an L next to his name. And that's silly. So, like, with the Chase Oliver thing, I don't think it's a win that he has an L next to his name. I would rather see Chase Oliver in the Democrat Party, making the Democrat Party better.
Yeah, he could be one of the best Democrats in the country. Like
maybe
we're happy when, like, Tulsi Gabbard was over there, like, challenging their party on the things. Like, she's wrong on so many other things, but she was
Chase Oliver would be a better Democrat than Tulsi Gabbard.
Yes, I think so. At least he's more consistent on the war issue. I was just happy when Tulsi Gabbard, like, was questioning war in Syria, but then when a lot of other things, she slips into kind of neoconservative on some other things.
For sure. But Chase Oliver does none of that.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Now, I do think it's worth noting. So back to, I know one of the demands of libertarians was pardons for for Ross Ulbricht, for Edward Snowden, for Julian Assange. We did hear, obviously, Donald Trump say that he would commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht, which was a great victory. And I think, if nothing else, coming out of this convention, to get a concession like that from the front runner for the presidency is probably one of the most impressive things the Libertarian Party has ever done. Because I mean, the Libertarian Party has not accomplished much over the course of its 50-year existence. So I mean, that's a real thing. Certainly, if you're Ross Ulbricht or Ross Ulbricht's mother, like that is a very important thing. And for a lot of folks in the movement, it is too. Obviously, that's not going to free America overnight, but it would set one of our heroes free. And I think that's very important. I will say,
Do you think that he'll actually do it? Or do you think he'll only do it if the Libertarian Party comes out and endorses him?
Well, no. I mean, so I guess here's the thing. Do I trust that he will do it? I guess what I know is that, I think a lot about what, who is it? Morton Blackwell, the head of the Leadership Institute, has said, right? We don't, the strategy to winning, right? We can have two strategies for winning. One, the first strategy would be to get all the right people who believe all the right things elected into positions of power to do the right thing because it's what's in their heart. But of course, that's naive and stupid. That's never going to happen because politics attracts people who want power, and people who want liberty have a tendency to run for the hills, not run for office. So we're at a disadvantage there, right? So we're never going to get all the right people elected to all the positions in total control. So the other path is to shape the political environment around the wrong people to make it politically expedient for them to do the right thing, because that's what's going to serve them politically. And so I think that's what we've done to some degree with Donald Trump in this case, right? We have extracted from him a verbal on the record promise, which is not nothing, right? That's something that if he doesn't follow through, he's a liar, and he can be called a liar, and he can be called all sorts of things. It wasn't, he didn't put this in like weaselly words like, oh, I may consider it. He said, I will do this, right?
He said, if you vote for me, I will do this. And so part of me is like, that looks like a pretty clear, like if the Libertarian Party says we support Donald Trump, I could be wrong. I don't know, he's all about the quid pro quo, right? That's like Donald Trump's thing.
Yeah, I guess it is. Or it was very transactional. And frankly, I thought there was a little bit of, I appreciated the honesty of the transactional nature of what he was proposing, right? Now, I will say he did say, I thought it was pretty ballsy for him to come out and like ask the Libertarian Party to nominate him as their nominee. But I do think that was a little bit like the art of the deal, right? I know from like fundraising, right? If I want someone to donate $10,000, I'm going to ask them for $20,000 so that $10,000 seems more reasonable, right? He said, I want the Libertarian Party to nominate me, or at least for most of you to vote for me, right? And so now voting for Donald Trump seems a lot more reasonable than the Libertarian Party not making him their nominee. So I think it was, that's what I think that was.
I think that when he said that, and most libertarians will vote for me regardless, like I think he was right. I think especially after what happened the next day. I think he was more right than he knew. But yeah, it is like the art of the deal thing where it's also just so Trump, right? It's like if I wasn't a libertarian before, I am now, and so you should nominate me because I've been sued by the government. It's like, all right.
He's like, I've learned how bad these deep state agents are after they've gone after me personally. I didn't care when they were going after other people, but now that they're after me.
I just sort of assumed that Donald Trump going to any political party convention would be like, and you should nominate me because I'm the greatest. I don't care what party. I'll be the greatest candidate.
He shows up to the Green Party convention. By the way, I love the environment. I'm the biggest Green Party person ever. I didn't even know.
That's right. That's right.
Anyway, it's like we invested in natural gas, and that brought climate change down. Anyway, but I do think it's interesting, right? And this is something that's been rolling over in my head since the convention, right? Is recognizing that there's no Ron Paul in the race. I mean, I will say, and frankly, I think I should throw a disclaimer in now, just because we've been talking about candidates and all that. The Free State Project is a 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we do not endorse any candidates. And the opinions stated here are the opinions of me and Bill and nobody else. So whatever I say here and my thoughts on races and all of that, that should not be construed to be the position of the Free State Project. That's just the thinking of Eric Brakey. All right, now that that's out of the way. So I've been trying to think through, like, look, there's no Ron Paul in the race. So I feel like, unless I just sit out the race completely, like I'm just looking at, okay, who's going to offer the best deal to the Liberty Movement? Who's going to understand we're not going to have a Libertarian in the White House? Which candidate, either voting for that candidate or seeing that candidate actually elected, will result in the best case for the Liberty Movement? And something I keep thinking about, I am a big fan of history, and in fact, Roman history. I mean, what do they say? Men think about the ancient Rome like 3 times a day or something. Well, that's certainly true for me. And one of my big heroes is Cato the Younger, who is like the last man standing defending the Roman Republic against Julius Caesar as the Republic fell and the empire rose. And he was like the Ron Paul of his day. Now, one of the great ironies of history, though, is, right, so there were these figures around the Republic. Obviously, everyone knows Julius Caesar, who became, the emperor, and his line, continued the empire for a long time. But that was almost avoided. There was another figure named Pompey the Great, who I oftentimes think people can contest it. I think Pompey the Great was kind of a Trump-like figure. If he was obsessed with how great he was, what a great general he was, and I think more than actual power, he was interested in glory and personal glory for himself. Right now,
Right.
Cato looked at Pompey as a danger to the Republic and someone who would had the potential to become a dictator and a despot, and he wanted nothing to do with him. Later on, they ended up being allies in the final battle for the Republic against Julius Caesar. But early on, Pompey came to Cato and proposed a marriage between their families to form an alliance. And Cato, being so principled, said, "No, I will never consider that. I would not work with a demagogue like you," right? This is considered to be one of the worst mistakes in Roman history, because what happened after that was Pompey said, okay, and he went and formed an alliance with Julius Caesar, and then leading to the death of the Roman Republic that Cato loved so much. And I wonder sometimes, I mean, with Donald Trump, I wonder sometimes, like, the best thing about Donald Trump is the worst thing about Donald Trump, which is how influenceable he is. He doesn't seem to really have a core ideology. Like, his ideology is like the last 10 people who talk to him, right? Which is sometimes why it does actually seem disproportionately important who he's got in the room with him. Is it Rand Paul and Tucker Carlson, or is it Mike Pompeo and John Bolton? Because that's the difference between whether we're going to war with Iran or not, whether we're assassinating Julian Assange or giving him a pardon. That's what it seems to be. And so I know people gave Rand Paul a lot of flack for cozying up to Donald Trump, but we can see that Rand Paul had a real influence on him on all of those Gulf trips. And I'm glad that he did it. I think it kept us out of war. And I wonder a little bit, Donald Trump is talking about like, oh, we're going to have Nikki Haley on the team. And he's like, I wonder a little bit if libertarians refuse kind of the offer to kind of, and obviously libertarians as individuals, we've got to make these decisions ourselves. But if we don't even consider the possibility of kind of working and having coalition with kind of the America First Donald Trump folks in this election, are we in fact pushing him back towards the neocons when libertarians could actually be an influence in the room with him? I wonder. I'm not saying what people should do. I'm just making the case. What do you think?
Man, it's hard, at this convention. I think you're right that it's probably, if you can get in the room with Trump, and I don't think many people get in the room with Trump, and I think generally people do. He respects their opinion. He is influenced by them because he doesn't have a strong core. I think you're right. I don't know that it's easy to get more people in the room with Trump. So, like, think about this. Trump wants yes men in the room with him. So, like, at the Libertarian National Convention, the delegates, there's like 800 delegates, were all promised seats at this speech. Before the delegates could get in, they made sure to get all the MAGA people in. So, like, the delegates came in and then had to physically remove MAGA people from the seats so that they could sit and watch the speaker who came to their convention. Now, these people have, in many instances, been planning to come to the convention for over a year. Whereas the MAGA
and they
people
paid a lot of
there,
money
they
to be
found out
there.
like 3 weeks ago that Trump was going to speak.
Yeah.
Right. So I would imagine that getting into Trump's cabinet or getting into the room with Trump or the Oval Office with Trump would be very much like this. Well, it's like, I've already got all these people who say they just absolutely love me coming in, and they're going to be in the room. And to get into the room, you kind of have to really push somebody out. And so if in the instance of an administration, the Mike Pompeos and all that, they're built in, dude. They're in the White House. Most of them are unelected bureaucrats. And so they're going to be in the room with Trump every single day, and getting libertarians into the room with him regularly is going to be exceedingly difficult. I'm not saying it wouldn't work. I'm just saying, like, it seems to me that there's a built-in process of we're going to keep all these people who just absolutely adore me around me. And Pompeo, I think, being like a deep state guy, is smart enough to butter Trump up, before the conversation and like be like, oh, you definitely want me in the room for that, Mr. Trump, because he's already in the White House, he's already in the administration, he's already have the ability to speak to him. And then he's going to be the guy in the room before like a Vivek. And that's not to say that Trump won't talk to Vivek. It's just like, who is actually going to get the ability to spend more time influencing him? And I don't think it's going to be libertarians. That said, I might vote for the guy. I'm open to the coalition. I would love to see Ross Ulbricht have a sentence commuted. I would love to see Julian Assange pardoned. I would love to see all these things happen. Edward Snowden. I don't know that it's going to happen. I don't think it will happen without influence. So it seems like maybe it's our only hope, but it's also like still a pipe dream.
Yeah.
And again, hope. That's hope for Trump. Let's not hope for any libertarian success.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, I just want to make sure it's on the record that Trump has promised to commute the sentence of Ross Ulbricht. He has not made a similar promise on Julian Assange. He did an interview on Tim Cass where he said he was directly asked about it, and he said he would look into it and consider it. Take that for what it's worth. That's not the promise. That's not anywhere near the level of promise we got on Ross Ulbricht. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has promised to pardon Assange and Snowden, though he didn't make a promise on Ross Ulbricht. The word is that his VP candidate Shanahan was supposed to be there and speaking, and she was going to make a promise on Ross Ulbricht, but that speech ended up being canceled for time or something. So take that for what it is.
Think about this though. Even if Donald Trump does pardon Ross Ulbricht, because all the libertarians went and voted for him, he's still the guy who did lockdowns. He's still the guy who gave Fauci the medal. He's still the guy who thinks that, printing trillions of dollars and sending paychecks directly to every American is like some brilliant form of capitalism that saves the country from a virus. And clearly this is just communism. It's just social, like, redistribution of wealth with the most insidious hidden tax ever in the form of inflation. Getting one guy pardoned, and I'm not saying this is a noble cause. It's just sad. Like, that's our biggest ask. We're all going to vote for the guy who's the king of lockdowns because he said one guy might go free. Might.
Yeah. They'll release one of our hostages.
Yeah. If you all vote for him, if you all vote for the dictator, he'll release one of your hostages. And it's like, I'm probably going to do it. But I'm not going to pretend that that's not like a sad state of the national affairs for libertarians, right? That's really, really sad. So, New Hampshire first, America second. I don't care about any of that stuff. I would love to see Ross freed. I would love to see Donald Trump be more libertarian. I don't know that either of those is realistic. Yeah.
I mean, I will say some other things that Trump said, right? We talked about, he said a libertarian in a cabinet position. Of course, you could end up being, in an episode of Twilight Zone and find yourself in charge of the roads. He did also
Bill
say,
Weld, or it could be Bill Weld,
or it could be Bill Weld, right?
Like, who is he going to pick?
Right. Yeah. I think hopefully if he wants to unify libertarians, he should announce it ahead of time who it's going to be. And remember that the only person who seemed to unify people at the convention was Ron Paul. So he needs someone from that wing of the liberty movement. But I did also say he wanted to have, like, I don't remember the verbiage used exactly, but like a pardon commission for pardoning other people of crimes, and he put libertarians in charge of that. I mean, of course, that's like an advisory commission that doesn't. I mean, it sounds like something that would make recommendations that he could yay or nay, but I suppose that's something. But I will say, what is, I had an interesting conversation with a delegate at the Libertarian Convention, and I don't want to say the person's name or what state they're from. I think that ultimately the person was overall friendly to me, and I don't want to out them, but it was a kind of a eye-opening thing for me about how different some of the people's perspectives are within the Libertarian Party than I have. Right. So I was talking to this guy, and he was not a Mises Caucus guy. He was more of an old guard guy. Right. And he was saying, I brought up, my working through the Republican Party is not an endorsement of like all the Republicans. In fact, I'm working to get rid of people like Liz Cheney and the neoconservatives and take the infrastructure away from them. He said, but Liz Cheney was so great because she told hard truths about Donald Trump. And I just thought, I think there are so many valid criticisms of Donald Trump, but if you've gotten to the point where you think that the neoconservatives represent a less dangerous threat to the country than Donald Trump, I just feel like we're living in different realities. And maybe people don't remember how bad things were under the Bush administration, and that all the criticisms I have of Donald Trump are ultimately things I would also criticize Barack Obama and George W. Bush for, where on certain things it was marginally better. He didn't start new wars, though he didn't end the existing ones, and he was pretty brutal in how he continued those existing ones.
But imagine being a libertarian who like went through the Obama years, with all the unwarranted searching, all the drone strikes overseas, etc. And then Trump gets elected. It's like, well, actually, Obama's pretty great because he criticized Trump. He did say some bad things about Trump, so that was actually a pretty good president. That's not how that works.
I will say I was very happy to use these kind of tribal sentiments on Republicans when Barack Obama was president to get them to oppose wars, right?
Sure.
I was like, it's like, man, all these wars that Barack Obama is starting, like maybe, it's like all the people who love George W. Bush's wars now that they were Obama's wars, like, yeah, we need to be against Obama's wars, right?
That's right.
I think that's the sad thing is just how tribal we are as human beings and how susceptible we are to that. But, use that where you can to promote liberty, I suppose. But I will say, I guess I'm just verbalizing my uncertainty because I'm genuinely undecided in the race for president right now. Again, not that it ultimately matters all that much because freedom is going to come from the bottom up, not from Washington, D.C. But hey, if you get a few things like a pardon for Ross Ulbricht, I suppose that's something very important too. But I think about how the neoconservatives have so effectively, like they infiltrate institutions, right? They are ultimately an ideological minority in this country, but they infiltrate institutions. They infiltrate the White House. They infiltrate the bureaucracies. And we as libertarians are so principled that we don't do the same. We want to stay in our little corner, in our little libertarian party where we represent 3% of the vote. And we say we aren't going to go and infiltrate the institutions and change anything. And I wonder if, we have an opportunity to push out the neocons because certainly I think they revealed themselves very much to Donald Trump after he got out, and they did everything they could. The Liz Cheneys of the world did everything they could to prosecute him and destroy him. I wonder if maybe he's learned a little bit of a lesson and the libertarians can step into the roles where the neoconservatives once existed in the Trump administration. But maybe that's giving Trump a little bit too much credit to realize the error of his past mistakes.
I mean, he certainly does not seem good at picking the people around him. Again, somebody who hates the deep state, he's pretty good at surrounding himself with deep state agents.
Yeah, he is. Well, I think probably the VP pick will tell us a lot about whether he's wised up or not. If he picks someone who's neoconservative, like a Nikki Haley, or just some GOP establishment shill, it'll tell us he didn't learn anything.
It's going to be an interesting ride. I don't know. A few years ago, I would get much more worried about every national election. And I'm kind of just knowing that we've got a whole project in New Hampshire and a whole mission here. It's like not a 4-year thing that has to swing like a pendulum all the time. It's like just always going. Much better goal, much more wholesome energy.
Slow and steady. We are winning the race in New Hampshire. We're bringing more people in, and America can go to hell, but New Hampshire will be free.
Yeah, no, seriously. When you talked earlier about how, the collapse of the Roman Empire, I'm like, if America kind of falls apart, it seems like during COVID, when America was falling apart the most, New Hampshire brought the most libertarians. Like when things get bad elsewhere, things get better here. So kind of interesting. We're like the positively charged end of a really, really big negative battery.
So maybe we should root for the worst possible outcome on the national level to make New Hampshire all.
That's right. That's the collapsitarian strategy, right?
I guess so. Well, hey, we're running out of time. Bill, I really appreciate you coming on and joining us and recapping the national convention with us of the Libertarian Party. I'll give you the final word and then I'll close things out.
Well, the final word is if you're not a libertarian who lives in New Hampshire and you don't want to keep being a loser or being, deluded about your plans to be president. Like if you're tired of fantasizing about something you can't do or just like losing every time you try, come to New Hampshire, come visit, check it out. This place is awesome. I grew up here. All these free staters that move here, there's somebody who does everything. You're into crypto or guns or homesteading or, building a family or you're a nerd, you're a programmer. We've got something for everybody. And there's a much longer, much more wholesome project to work on than the stage of national politics, which is often just such a mess. And particularly in the Libertarian Party, where there's a big battle for identity. You don't have to do that here. You can come and be a left libertarian, run as a Democrat. Everybody's gonna be happy. You can run as if you're like more of a Hoppian guy, run as a Republican. Everybody's gonna be happy. Just come here. We have room for the full spectrum of libertarians, and you can actually be a star. You can be a hero here in New Hampshire.
Yeah, we even have left-wing libertarians in Keene who do great work. I think they sit out in front of the police station and smoke pot. That's their that's their civil disobedience and activism, and good on them for it. So, whatever stripe of libertarian you are, even if you're a Chase Oliver libertarian, we're a big tent. We just want people who don't want to hurt people and don't take their stuff. So, come to New Hampshire. And Bill, I really appreciate how welcoming you've been to me personally as I've been kind of making the transition over to New Hampshire. You've been a friendly face since I first arrived, and I really appreciate it.
Hey, glad you came, man. Live free or die.
All right. Awesome. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
All right, everyone. That's the show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once more, I want to tell you, time is running out to get your tickets for the Porcupine Freedom Festival taking place just a few weeks away, June 17th through the 23rd at Rogers Campground in Lancaster, New Hampshire. Get your tickets at porkfest.com. That's pork with a C, not a K, because it's short for porcupine. If you go to porkfestwithak.com, we've learned there's nothing there. Maybe somewhere out there there's a hypothetical barbecue festival, but I guarantee you our liberty-loving free market vendors at PorkFest, who there's some barbecue vendors there. I guarantee you their barbecue will be even better than the imaginary Pork with a K festival that doesn't exist. Anyway, so go to the right website, get your tickets, porkfest.com. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, as always, to our producer, Raynita, who was also a delegate at the Libertarian National Convention and was sporting an Appeal to Heaven flag with her, of course, with the great pine tree, the symbol of liberty and defiance to tyrants in New England, which has gotten very controversial for some reason lately. Anyway, thank you to her for all of her work. And furthermore, everyone, as always, my opinion is the Federal Reserve should be destroyed.